When you hear the term Western civilization, what comes to mind? What does this term actually mean to you, and what images does it evoke? For many, this brings to mind ideas like democracy, free speech, and capitalism. Others may imagine Gothic architecture, medieval knights and castles, or the artwork of the Italian Renaissance. However we picture it, the world we live in today is not entirely new. It is an inherited tradition, a conversation spread across millennia. And in many respects, that conversation began in ancient Greece. More than 2,000 years ago, scattered along the shores of the Mediterranean, small Greek city states began asking questions that humanity had never thought to ask before. What is the nature of reality? What makes a society just? And what does it mean to live a good life? In this video, we will discuss how Greek influence courses through the veins of Western civilization. We will explore three of Greece's main enduring legacies that shaped the West, through its culture, political thought, and philosophy. Because to understand Greece, in many ways, is to understand ourselves. As the great classicist Edith Hamilton puts it, Greece is the mother of Western civilization. Before philosophical dialogues and political debates, the Greeks told stories, and those stories would define what it meant to be a Greek. The illustrious poet Homer blessed the world with two epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. For generations, these works were not simply a means of entertainment, they were a source of education, moral instruction, and cultural identity. They set the foundation that the rest of the Western literary tradition would build upon. In the Iliad, we see the drama of the Trojan War. At the center of the poem is Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior of his time, who is torn between his pride, his anger, and the knowledge of his own mortality. Achilles withdraws from the battle after feeling his honor has been insulted. His pride reshapes the entire war, leading to devastating consequences, including the death of his closest companion, Patroclus. Achilles' wrath is finally unleashed upon the Trojans, culminating in the legendary duel between Achilles and Hector. In these two figures, Homer places opposing visions of heroism face to face, revealing the moral heart of the Iliad itself. Through the Iliad, Homer explores themes that continue to resonate across time: pride, grief, loyalty, and the painful recognition that even the greatest or most virtuous hero could not escape death. But arguably, the most significant theme we discover in the story is the cost of glory. In the Odyssey, heroism takes on a different form. We follow the Greek hero Odysseus as he struggles to return home after the Trojan War. Throughout the poem, Odysseus encounters one tragic event after the other, facing monsters, storms, temptation, and the wrath of the gods. Odysseus survives not through his strength, but through intelligence and adaptability. At the same time in the story, his wife Penelope and son Telemachus endure years of uncertainty and hardship, striving to remain loyal to Odysseus, while the kingdom of Ithaca grows increasingly unstable in the absence of its king. In this we see how the pursuit of honor and glory by an individual often comes at the expense of those closest to him, revealing the personal hidden cost behind heroic achievement. The influence of Homer echoes throughout Western literary history. Most of the great epics belonging to the Western tradition, such as Virgil's Aeneid, Dante's Divine Comedy, and James Joyce's Ulysses, all deeply reflect in different ways the enduring spirit of Homeric storytelling. Greek culture also manifested itself beyond poetry and into the visual arts and architecture. Greek sculptors pursued balance, proportion, and harmony, believing beauty reflected order and rationality. Their idealized human figures expressed a belief that humanity itself possessed dignity and potential. These same principles guided Greek architecture, where temples and buildings were constructed according to mathematical symmetry and careful proportion. These ideals would profoundly shape the Italian Renaissance when artists deliberately studied Greek models in an effort to revive classical realism. Drama also flourished in ancient Athens, where playwrights such as Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes transformed theater into a shared civic experience. Thousands of Athenians would gather in open air theaters during events such as the Festival of Dionysus to collectively watch these plays. These performances were not only about entertainment, they served as public conversations. Take Greek tragedies, for example, which which examined human decision making and its consequences. These stories included themes like justice, pride, revenge, and fate, subjects that still appear in modern storytelling. Take Shakespeare's tragedies, for example, like Macbeth, Hamlet, and Othello. They all owe much to Greek dramatic traditions, particularly their exploration of moral conflict and the tragic consequences of human decisions. Another major Greek innovation was the transformation of the study of history. Historians such as Herodotus and Thucydides moved beyond mythological explanations and sought rational accounts of past events. They compared sources, analyzed causes, and attempted to understand events through human behavior rather than divine intervention. In doing so, they laid the foundations of historical scholarship as we know it today. Greek culture did far more than create beauty. It placed an unprecedented emphasis on the human individual. While earlier ancient civilizations often understood humanity primarily in relation to divine authority and cosmic order, the Greeks increasingly celebrated human reason, autonomy, and creative potential. Human beings were not merely subjects of fate or servants of the gods, but active participants capable of shaping both society and their own destiny. To again quote Edith Hamilton, the Greeks were the first to put man at the center of the universe. Perhaps one of the most influential contributions from ancient Greece, particularly in Athens, was the development of citizenship and democracy. Greek humanism, or the belief in the value and rationality of human beings, began to influence politics in the Greek city-states. People increasingly believed that human decisions, not only divine will, shaped society. Not the gods, but humans had the power to build a better civilization. In Athens, the concept of citizenship was more than a legal status, it became a moral responsibility. Athenians believed that a good citizen could pursue arete, or excellence, by fulfilling their civic duty through attending assemblies, engaging in debate, serving on juries, and when necessary, defending the city in battle. Political participation was not viewed as optional, it was essential to both the strength of the community and the development of the individual. Athens also advanced the idea of isonomy, or equality before the law. Citizens could speak publicly, vote, hold office, and expect fair treatment under the law. Centuries later, Enlightenment thinkers would draw heavily from Greek political philosophy when shaping modern democratic institutions and constitutional governments. The Greek political experiment suggested that civic responsibility and public debate were not weaknesses of a society, but its greatest strengths. In my opinion, among all the achievements of the ancient Greeks, the development of philosophy, especially its commitment to rationalism and ethics, stands as their greatest contribution to Western civilization. Philosophers such as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle reshaped how we understand knowledge, morality, and the natural world and our place in it. They ask questions that remain fundamental today, such as how should we live? What is justice? What is knowledge? What makes a life meaningful? Socrates transformed philosophy through conversation and is remembered for his method of questioning, now called the Socratic method. Instead of lecturing or presenting himself as a teacher with all the answers, Socrates engaged people in conversation and asked a series of probing questions that forced them to examine their assumptions. He would often begin by asking someone to define a concept like justice, courage, or virtue, and as the discussion continued, his questions would reveal contradictions or gaps in their reasoning, leading them to realize how little they truly understood. Concerned with the moral decline among the youth, Socrates believed that this process of questioning was absolutely essential, because recognizing one's own ignorance was the first step toward wisdom. He also believed that an unexamined life was not a life worth living, meaning that self reflection and the search for truth were necessary for a meaningful and ethical life. Socrates understood a well functioning democracy was dependent on a virtuous citizen body. This understanding was his motivation for engaging in these kind of conversations, hoping they would lead to a more virtuous society. Ultimately, it was this concern that led Socrates to be tried and found guilty of corrupting the youth and forced to drink hemlock, resulting in his death. Plato, a student of Socrates, explored themes of justice, knowledge, and reality through philosophical dialogues or written conversations in which different speakers debate important questions. Plato used this format to continue the method of inquiry he learned from Socrates, which allowed ideas to naturally unfold through discussion rather than simple lectures. Most famously, he posited that the physical world we perceive through our senses is only an imperfect reflection of a higher and unchanging realm of what he called the realm of the forms. In his most notable work, The Republic, Plato examines what makes a society just and how education shapes individuals. In this dialogue, Plato argues that justice exists when each part of a society fulfills its proper role, and he suggests that good leadership requires wisdom, discipline, and a commitment to the common good. He also introduces the idea of the philosopher king, the belief that only those who truly understand truth and justice are suited to govern. In his allegory of the cave, Plato explores the difficulty of leading people from ignorance to knowledge and shows how education enables an individual to perceive reality more clearly. The allegory is truly deserving of its own separate discussion, and if you are unfamiliar with it, I encourage you to explore it further and ask yourself, how does it still apply to our world today? What are the shadows that we stare at, and who are the puppet masters? Aristotle, who has been called the philosopher, expanded philosophy into nearly every field of knowledge, including logic, ethics, biology, and political theory, just to name a few. Unlike his teacher Plato, who believed that the senses were imperfect and misleading, Aristotle emphasized observation and empirical study, believing that understanding begins with studying the natural world and carefully examining evidence. He developed formal systems of logic that were used for centuries as the foundation of clear reasoning and argument, and his method of classifying plants and animals helped establish patterns of classification that later became crucial to scientific study. Aristotle's influence did not end in the ancient world. In fact, it only increased. During the Middle Ages, many Christian theologians relied heavily on his writings, especially with his work in metaphysics, or the branch of philosophy concerned with the fundamental nature of reality, existence, and causation. Theologians and philosophers such as Thomas Aquinas used Aristotle's ideas to help explain theological concepts, attempting to demonstrate that reason and faith were symbiotic rather than antagonistic. Aristotle's framework for understanding cause, substance, and purpose became deeply embedded in medieval scholarship and remained influential in European universities for centuries. Because of this, Aristotle not only contributed greatly to ancient philosophy, but also played a crucial role in the intellectual life of the Middle Ages and the subsequent development of Western thought. Will Durant argued that Aristotle's influence has been so great that no thinker has ever rivaled him in the history of Western civilization. The Greek emphasis on rational inquiry and ethical reflection is deeply embedded in modern politics, education, science, and law in ways that are so familiar we hardly notice their origins. In politics, the idea that policies and systems of government should be debated, examined, and justified through reason, rather than accepted blindly, reflects the philosophical traditions established in ancient Greece. In traditional Western education, the practice of questioning, discussion, and critical thinking, as well as encouraging students not to just memorize information, but to understand and evaluate it, echoes the methods of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. In fact, for a long period of time, these thinkers served as the backbone of Western education. Greek literature, art, and drama established enduring models of expression. Greek historians transformed how we study the past. Greek political thought influenced modern democracy, and Greek philosophers laid the intellectual foundations of rational thought and science. This enduring influence reminds us that the ideas of the past are not just relics or memories, but living traditions that continue to shape the world we inhabit today. When the study of history is reduced to simply memorizing names, places, and dates, rather than examining the legacy of these historical events or individuals, we not only lose an appreciation for the past, but also a deeper understanding of our own civilization and the traditions that sustain it. More than 2,000 years later, we still think with Greek ideas, debate with Greek methods, and build societies shaped by Greek principles. To study ancient Greece is to encounter the foundations of our own civilization and to recognize that the conversation that started in the Mediterranean thousands of years ago continues to shape who we are today. If you've enjoyed this exploration of ancient Greece and made it this far into the video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that modern democracies still live up to the Greek ideals of citizenship, reason, and civic responsibility? Why or why not? Is there an important figure from ancient Greece whom I did not mention that you believe deserves greater recognition? Does the Homeric idea of heroism still appear in modern art and literature? If so, to what extent? And if not, how has it changed? Finally, thank you for watching.
La tre polla de dog che le cos deis